Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Chase Jarvis. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Creative Live. This show is where I sit down with the world's top. You fucked me up.
You literally said, do whatever you want to do. Did you say that? Take over the show. Do whatever you want to do.
He did.
I'd never done that before in my life. But
This is where I sit down with the top creatives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders like this guy who you didn't see that. Just pretend you didn't see that. And I do my best to unpack actionable and valuable insights with the goal of helping you live your dreams, whether that's in career or hobby and in life. My guest today, he's a comedian, clearly. He's the host of a new award-winning show. It's kind of new. It's a year and change in its second season. United Shades of America. My guest is Kamau Bell.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
What's up, sir?
That was funny.
You told me.
I know, I did. I invited
For people who are watching, he spent the whole time do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it's like your
enjoy
show as
yourself,
much as
it's your
mine.
show. So
It's
I
true.
thought I'd do something I've seen other people do that I think is obnoxious.
It was
but,
brilliant, though. As the host, you host your own show. You know. It's
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Wait a minute. I don't get off my game very often. That was impressive.
No, I'm good. Yeah.
New show, actually, second season of a new show.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as old as, it hasn't been on the air as long as Seinfeld or Bonanza or The Simpsons, so it's still
Just
new.
Right behind those two
Right
shows.
behind.
Right? But tell them, so I believe that the world is familiar with your work. Impressive.
But no, but I'm still a niche product. I'm not mainstream or worldwide.
I don't know. You're all, maybe it's because I've been tracking you and I'm getting retargeted by all the ads for the show.
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
like,
no, with
you're
CNN,
everywhere
people
from me.
definitely at least see your face.
Yeah.
It's the great thing about working at CNN, especially in the original series side, is they don't have that many shows at one time. Like
Clearly,
so,
they got
the
show.
They got me, they got Bourdain, and they have Soundtracks right now. So they only have 3 shows to advertise. And Soundtracks, The Rock is producing it, but he's not. It's not really his show, and he's not hosting it. And Bourdain, everybody knows Bourdain. You got to talk about him too much.
Right.
He's great, but you just have to go. He's back, and people go, okay, I'll be there. But with me, they're like, yeah, look at the commercial. Look at this funny commercial. Look at this serious commercial. Look at this banner ad. Look at a billboard ad. Like they have to really build the thing out in a way that they don't have to do with Bourdain. With Bourdain, they just send out one tweet. He's coming back.
He's coming
Sunday.
back. Excellent. We'll all be there.
Yeah. We will all be there like we always are every week and have been there for the last 10 years.
I actually heard a comparison that, so if Bourdain's bouncing around trying different cuisine, it's an incredible show, by the way. He's a great host.
No, he is the. I mean, that's when I was sitting at home before I ever had the show. Years before, I was like, I'd like to do a show like that. So he's absolutely. There was a thing called the Travel Show that PBS and lots of stations did, but he put his personality square in the middle of it instead of a travel host being like, look at this, that's nice.
Instead of it's the Inca ruins being the hero, it's Bourdain.
It's Bourdain. You just want to hang out with him. He can go anywhere.
The Inca, that's in the background.
Yeah, he can go anywhere.
But I heard you say something, I don't know if this is true, about that being analogous to what you want to do instead of food and destinations or parts unknown.
Yeah.
That yours is topics.
Yeah, it's
racism.
It's race and culture, and
culture.
So for me, it's like it's topic focused. It's not really like, that's what we're like, and it's also about relevancy. So if your group is in the news and it's clear that your group is not getting to speak for themselves or getting not the shot they need, or if your group is never in the news and it's like, why aren't they ever in the news?
Yeah.
I sort of feel like a need to go there and talk to you and see if I can let you hand the mic to you. I mean, it's the same thing we do here. Like you told me to take over my show.
Yep.
When I sit down with people, I go, say whatever you want to say.
Yep.
I will not interrupt you. I'm going to make some jokes, but they're not going to be at you. And but I want you to I want you to feel like you got your story out.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And talk to me about the conception of the show. Like, you sit in your room, you started going there, you're sitting in your room, like, I kind of want to show, like, Anthony Bourdain, or was it a long journey? I know you had a show before that.
Yeah, it was both a long journey, and then it sort of fell in my lap. So, so separate from United States of America or any conception of that, I would sit, in my girlfriend's house at the time, and hang out with her roommates, and we would watch like Bourdain's show and Mike Rowe's show, Dirty Jobs, and and we would just sort of sit around and I would watch these shows, and I would just be like, this is way before my first show, Totally Biased, and I would just be like, I would like one of those shows, but about racism is what I thought about it, like sort of going around the country and sampling the racism.
Yeah.
So that was just my own, but then I got Totally Biased, which was like a very traditional late night talk show. Like in the Daily Show, Samantha Bee, John Oliver style.
Yeah.
It's now a style, but at the time it was just like the Daily Show sort of. And that lasted about a year. And when it was over, the feedback I got universally was that my best parts of it weren't the in-studio stuff or the interview stuff. It was when I went out into the world and talked to people. So then I met with CNN, and when I was trying to find a job, basically, I met with a bunch of people, and CNN had been pitched a show that was basically like, it was called Black Men, White America. I've told the Jimmy Fox who runs the company I wouldn't tell this story again, but I'm telling it one last time.
One last time.
This
is it. This is the last time.
Because he's like, why did that title was so bad? It's called Black Men, White America. And at that point,
can you say the title one more time?
Black Man, White America.
Okay, there you go. We made that clear. It's on the record.
Yeah, or as I call it, Black Man and America. So the idea was that you would send a black person around, or black comedian around to white places. And so when they pitched that to me, I was like, does it have to be this white place? Like, I already have white in-laws. I kind of know what that's like. And I just was like, because I come from the Bay Area, it's like I would want to go to more than just white places.
Yeah.
So they kicked it back to Jimmy Fox. He liked that idea better. The title he changed the title to United Shades of America, which is a way better title.
Amazing title.
It's a much more unifying. It's not so divisive.
Yeah.
And, and so then we sort of got together and put the team together and did the first season. Yeah.
And it crushed.
I mean, luckily, the thing is about CNN is it's great. You just sort of have to outdraw the news, on Sunday nights at 10 o'clock, which unless something happened,
right.
Unless there's a plane missing,
yeah.
You can outdraw the news. You know what I mean? So it's like, I fairly, it's a huge platform, and yet it's also not like, I'm not like on NBC at 8 o'clock on Thursday where it's like, you better get 45 billion people or else this is not, so for me, and it's also a very dedicated following on CNN. People who watch CNN watch it all the time.
Yeah.
And then also, like I always say, even if you hate CNN, eventually you're sitting in an airport waiting for your flight and it's on the TV.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
You just can't. It's sort of, and then you see my face,
right,
and then
right.
I've gotten all these cool photos of people in the airport, like at airports waiting for their flight, and everybody's watching me talk to the Ku Klux Klan, like sort of like, what is this?
What is? Can you turn the volume up?
Exactly,
I gotta hear this
so,
shit because it's in an airport.
Yeah, so I think the fact that I look like myself, that I don't look like a guy who's normally on CNN, the fact that I'm talking to people who maybe you see in small stories on CNN, but not for long periods of time. Like we just did an episode about gang activity in Chicago this past Sunday, and it was just like, you see stories on CNN about gangs or news about gangs, but not like where you go, here's the mic, you talk, and I'll just listen.
Wow.
Yeah.
One more question about CNN. So a friend of mine, Casey Neistat, just sold sold his company, and so is this a trend for CNN? Trying to are they getting after it? Is this
First of all, I didn't get that deal. I did not get the Casey deal.
Yeah.
I read about that. I was like, I need to call my agent. This is like, I was like, what? And he's still showing up to work. I would be out. That would be the last. Maybe they don't have to give me that big check because I would be done. I would be like, I'm going to email you
He worked really hard.
He definitely worked hard, and I'm not anyway. But I was definitely like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hey, WME. Good for him. And I think that the great thing is that maybe CNN sort of like before they had me. All the shows they had were based around people who already had shows.
Yep.
Like Bourdain, Lisa Ling, Morgan Spurlock, Mike Rowe. They were all people who had sort of had these types of shows. But then they signed me and Reza Aslan, who is he has a show called Believer that also did great this season. His show just aired earlier this year. So that was the first time they sort of created shows out of whole cloth. And so for me, I would like to think that in some way the success of my show and Reza's show made them go, oh, maybe we should really look outside of this, of what we even conceived we could do here. Yeah. So I think, shout out, good job. And if he needs a producing partner.
But how cool is it that, for example, that you hadn't had that or they hadn't done that before? I talk a lot about how it's the first time in history of the world where a lot of the gatekeepers that have been there before are absent or looking to invite new people into the party.
Well, we're on the internet right now. We're on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is the whole thing is that there has been the barriers of entry have gotten a lot less barrier-y. Yeah. So you can just sort of set it up.
See and spoken like a true journalist. Barrier-y.
That's why I don't claim journalism status. But for me, I look at Issa Rae who starts The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl on YouTube.
Incredible.
She never probably would have even gotten a meeting at HBO if she had said, I have this idea about a show about me. Who are you? And so I'm not, there are people at HBO are great, but it's just, they wouldn't have probably conceived that. So she does this show, she proves that it's a thing, she writes a book based on the show, and then suddenly HBO's like, could you bring that over here? It's so for me, it's you have to sort of look at all this stuff as yes, you want to build your own brand, but also it's a constant audition tape for people who have the funds to sort of kick it up another notch.
I love that you said that, and I'm gonna do one more dovetail before I shift gears, and that is, do you know Justin Simeon, Dear White People?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know him, but
Okay,
yeah.
he's also been on the show. His story is very similar. He built and shot the pilot to a show to a film that had never been shot, and it was like he had shot it. So he made this beautiful thing, and then shopped the trailer like he had a film.
Yeah.
And then when he got close to the deal, he revealed, I ain't got no film. And they found someone to finance it. He went on and built it. It was an amazing release in the theater, and they just made a television show about it. So
Yeah, and I mean, the thing about that, you have to realize is that this is just the 21st century version of Robert Townsend, who's a filmmaker. He is a filmmaker, but in the 80s, in the late 80s, financing his film on credit cards. Like back in the day, they used to, kids pay attention, they used to just send you credit cards in the mail to get you to sign up for credit cards. So they would send you a credit card. Yeah. I think that's illegal now. And
I hope it is.
Yeah. So he would just say like, huh, and he used those credit cards to finance Hollywood Shuffle, which is basically in part responsible for the show In Living Color, which brings us the Wayans families, which brings us Jim Carrey. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, yeah. And so the idea is that or Spike Lee did that, is independent films, and you sort of just, you gotta make your own gravy. There's usually a commercial I see back when I was a kid about dog food that made its own gravy. You put water in it, makes it, and I always think about that. You gotta make your own gravy.
it's beautiful. It's a great line. I'm going to use that in the promotion of the show. Note, make your own gravy. So we got off what I thought was an interesting little tangent right there. I'm going to bring it back and make it about you. So
I mean, it feels like it's still been about me, but
well, it's great. That's the thing. Is those people think it's about them. I think it's about me. You think it's about you.
Yeah.
But specifically, take us back to what propelled you to pursue a career as a comedian, to pursue a niche where 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 the people who try and make it can make it. What's your motivation?
I mean, for me, I think every kid has some sort of like, that initial spark of a thing they want to be. Like, whether it's a fireman or, I mean, at first it was superhero, but that's not a job yet till they get all that HGH and human growth stuff, till they settle that out, until they really get that bionic stuff going. It's not really a job. So I was like, I can't do that. And then it was like comic book artist, but I couldn't draw that well. But I always loved comedy. I mean, I'm right around the same age as Saturday Night Live. So I grew up watching Saturday Night Live. And so for me, when I was a little kid, my mom said she could make me do anything if she promised to let me watch Saturday Night Live. So, I mean, I'm the person who was like, as a 5-year-old going like, it hasn't been good since the original cast. You know what I mean? Like, it's like
seriously, where's Belushi? Come on.
Yeah. No,
I've been
hating on Saturday Night Live since before that was cool. So, I mean, shout out right now, Kate McKinnon's amazing. But, for me, it's like, it was just a thing. And then also, that means that Eddie Murphy was on TV when he was like 19 or 20. And he looked the same age as me. I mean, he was older than me. He's like 10, 15 years older than me. But I was like, this is like my friend who's on this show.
Yeah.
And so for me, Eddie Murphy was like the first like superstar that I really cared about. And, followed his career. And so it was just like a thing like and then I love stand-up comedy. I remember seeing Seinfeld on The Tonight Show. Chris Rock, Bring the Pain, changed my life. I mean, I was in my 20s at that point. But it was just a thing that like I thought, and as an only child, I think there's something about being up there by yourself that I really resonated with. Like, you're just up there talking. You just hung Everybody has to pay attention, because that's the agreement. Yeah.
Brilliant. So take us from not having any job. Take us from from wondering how to start. I think that's one of the things that the people who are watching this show or listening to it, they are enthusiastic about a thing or being or becoming something that they're not today, and taking the first step is the hardest. So I love to find out give us the first couple of steps.
Well, I mean, for me, like I started in the 90s, so there was pre-internet, so you had to like, how do you start doing stand-up comedy? It was like,
we talk about Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
Yep, right in there. Yep, that's my era. Music hasn't been good since the 90s either, but so I'm that guy at this age. But so a friend of mine was like, who I went to high school with, he's my best friend, knew I wanted to do stand-up comedy. He's like, there's an open mic comedy thing down the street from my apartment. So if not for that, I don't know, and I was in Chicago at the time, maybe I would have stumbled across somewhere there, but it was him, and it was him coming with me. Like, he went with me for like a month and just watched every week. We just watched, and I sort of was like, I'll go up some week. And he just came and hung out, and then I finally went up, and then he hung out with me. We were really good friends. Like, first 2 years, I don't think he missed a show I did. Like, he was just like, wow. So not everybody's gonna get that, But it is about like, first of all, you need a support system if you're going to do something that is really crazy, like do stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
It's harder to do it if you don't have people who sort of are like okay with the craziness of it.
Yeah.
You know, my dad wasn't okay with it. He thought I dropped out of college. He thought it was bad. My mom was just like, whatever you want to do. You know, like so. I mean, she supported me. I don't be. She was like, really like, whatever you want to do. I want to be clear. She would be upset if I diminished it. But so yeah, and then I mean, but right now, so I look at back then like if he hadn't told me that maybe this doesn't exist. But now it's so much. There's so much information available to you about how to do anything, and you have to really take advantage of that. You have to really like Google the thing and look it up and figure it out. And there's going to be some website. There's probably a YouTube video like here's how you start doing stand-up comedy. You know, what I mean, it's very clear. And then the thing is, you got to jump in, 2 feet. You got to really like get in there, especially for something like stand-up. If you do it once every now and again, you're never going to find out if you're any good at it or if you love it. Like, so you have to really, whatever it is, you have to really jump in and go, okay, I'm going to really dedicate some time to this. Because the thing about stand-up, especially, I always say that stand-up comedy doesn't actually want you to be a stand-up comedian. Stand-up comedy is like, we're full. We're not taking,
the shit out of you.
It's like we don't really need anybody else. It's kind of like those movies about the Shaolin Temple. I don't know if they ever existed like that, but like you just show up and sit outside of stand-up comedy and it's like, we don't need that today. Can you please move? And so you have to really like, go for it because there's a buzz of the sort of that pink cloud when you start. Like I'm on stage and I'm hanging out with I have new friends and it's like a new social scene and I'm starting to get some laughs. But then at that point, it's just about failure, being okay with failure. There are some people who come out of the box really strong. Dave Chappelle is always I've heard he was like immediately funny. But like for most of us, you have to just sort of be okay with mostly failure for a period of time, and for everybody, it's a different length of time. And then you have to be okay with success that isn't really financial success. Like I had good shows all this week, but I didn't make any money or I made very little money. I still have a day job. And you have to be okay with people like sort of condescending to what you're doing.
Oh, so you're doing stand-up, right? You're gonna make hundreds.
Yeah, or no, the funny thing I find is like, oh, you do stand-up comedy. Where do you perform? And if you go this coffee shop and that bar on Wednesdays, people go, oh, so you're not really a stand-up comedian. Whereas like nobody really does that with other art forms. You say you're, maybe with writers, but like you don't have to prove that you're the thing. Like, and then it becomes like, oh, where do you perform? And you go, oh, I've been on TV. Oh, what station? Then you go, what station? Comedy Central. I don't have that channel. Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you. So it's people always want to sort of diminish the thing you're doing, and then you get to the point where you're like, okay, now I've been on the things, I've been on enough things, I have all the credits. And then people are just like, I just don't think you're funny. All right, well, it's just like so you just have to be okay with sort of eating and swallowing and sort of passing negativity through you, because if you get caught up in it, it's hard. And the other thing you have to be okay with is it's important that you are I think, this is true of me, that I'm my hardest critic. So you don't want somebody else to be a harder critic of you than you. Doesn't mean that there aren't people going to criticize you from angles you weren't thinking about. I think that's one thing. You have to be open to feedback, but you really have to be real with yourself and be like, am I getting better? Was this year better than last year? And if it wasn't, what can I do to change that? So I moved from Chicago to the Bay Area just because I was like, I'm not getting better. Like my third year, I was like, I repeated my second year. So I moved to the Bay Area.
So comedy. Were you, as a kid, funny? Oh, you're so funny. Were you going by W then?
No, it was always W. That was the full name, W. Kamau Bell. That was Kamau. W is my dad's first name was Walter, and my first name Walter. So he was Walter, I was Kamau. But I was funny to my mom and my good friends. I was not the class clown. I mean, my dad was totally surprised when I told him I was doing stand-up comedy.
That kid is not funny.
No, he would not have described me as being funny, lazy, athletically not gifted, things like that. But he would not have described me as funny. So, I don't think for most of my family, like my aunts and uncles and people like that, nobody was like, oh yeah, Kamau's really funny. I know those people who are really funny. I've seen them, so I know it. I know when people. I was always prepared. I was always a little embarrassed to tell people I was a comedian for a long time because nobody was like, "You're so funny." And at some point, you sort of do it long enough, you realize, yeah, not everybody was the class clown.
Yeah.
A lot of us are comedians because we're trapped in our heads and we're sort of always like thinking about things. It's not because we're like dominating the scene.
I think that's really common. The same is true with me. I was considered myself a photographer long before I would tell anyone else that I thought of myself as that, because they were like, really?
Yeah. They always want you to prove that where have you been published?
Yeah.
I have a camera, I take pictures, they're nice.
Right, yeah. And I think it's a real thing for the folks who are listening, that playing through that obviously is a really important part of making it, because maybe you can comment about this. I think stamina is critical. Like you can make whatever you need to make happen if you just outlast. Like if you're the only one left in the room, you're there. All right, I'll put you on.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading this quote from Henry Rollins. I don't know if he said it because it's hard to know. You know,
what he said and what
but
he
was basically
incorporated.
like the secret is don't quit. Like if you keep going, something's gonna happen. Like that's and I always remember that. Yeah, just don't quit. If you quit, then you're not. You know, Jesse Jackson had that quote years ago about running for president. If you run, you might lose. If you don't run, you're guaranteed to lose. So I always feel like you just have to sort of like make an honest effort. Be honest with yourself about the effort you're making. Am I getting better? Because you may be like, oh, I'm not really good at stand-up comedy, but maybe it leads you to be a writer or a producer or a director. But you know, so it'd be on. But yeah, don't quit.
And there's actual action behind that. There's so many people that I see get stuck in like thinking about doing something and playing Xbox all day as opposed to doing the thing.
Yeah, I mean, and comedy's really seductive. It's really easy to think that it's easy to think that your procrastination and your laziness is actually part of the process.
I'm getting material.
Yeah. I just need to like sort of think about things, and I mean, I know some comics who still live that way and have made it, but I think it's a testament to their talent,
Yeah.
But yeah, for me it was like, you better get up early and get to your day job and do that because you don't want to lose your job and you don't pay your bills and you have to like. But I also said no to a lot of stuff that, looking back, maybe I said no to too many things. But I always had a real sense of what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do.
Where did you get that sense?
I think it was my mom. I think it was just like be your own person, like and as being an only child, sort of you only are influenced by your own influences in some sense. So like, this is how I feel, and I think that's fine because nobody's telling me it's wrong. I don't have that sense of like brothers or sisters who are sort of telling you that you're not doing the right thing. And I was always fine with being my own company. Like I have the friend I have who's my best friend. We've been best friends since high school, and it's like just that. No, that's enough. And I have other friends, and I have other good friends, but it's like I'm just sort of really. I've always sort of kept a pretty close circle. Yeah. So for me, it's like being able to sort of be your own counsel, I think, is important too. For me, it was like, so to just go, I know everybody thinks I should do this, but I don't think I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's times where like, I remember when I took the pilot for the CNN show, United States of America, my best friend who I've been best friends with since high school was like, I don't think you should do that. There was another offer on the table, like, you should take the other one. And to this day, he says like, yeah, I was wrong. So for me, even though my best friend was like, that's not a good idea, I was like, I'm going to do it anyway. And, so here we are.
All right, I'm totally biased, but totally biased.
Yep.
Was a great show.
It was a little engine that could. That without that show, I'm not sitting here right now.
True.
Yeah, for me, it's just like, it was a moment in time, and I'm glad, and I learned a lot from it. It's taught me a lot about how show business works. Because before that, I wasn't really in show business, and I got
for the folks at home, this is a show previous to United States of America.
Yeah, it was a late night talk show on FX. And then FXX, and then FXX.
FXX.
Get the FXX out of here. And Chris Rock was the executive producer. He was the one who decided to help me get a TV show. I wasn't even named in that direction. And I got to meet him, and he was like my mentor. And still, I can call him when I have things. We're working on a project now. But I sort of get to like, that was I feel like I went to a 1 year long, like, university course in comedy and show business, and Chris Rock was my professor, and I always called him like foul-mouthed Yoda. Like it was like he was filled with a lot of wisdom, but wasn't always grammatically correct, and it was filthy. So so it was great to have that. It was great to have him in my corner, and and everything's happened. I ran into him recently. He was like, I hadn't seen him since the show ended, so it's been several years now, like 3 years or something, and he was like. He said, we talked for a minute. He's like, thanks for making me look like I'm a good judge of talent. Because when the show got canceled, maybe I sucked. Maybe it was just, but he said, you'll be fine. And he was right. But, the fact that my career sort of gone on and gotten bigger, it like makes him look like he knows what he's doing. So I'm happy to be a part of making him look like he knows what he's doing. Not that he needs my help, but yeah, I'm happy to sort of be in that sort of the Chris Rock universe.
Well, let's take up that question for a second. How did you find yourself in the company of Chris Rock? Because that is the dream of so many people out there, going back to the hard work comment we were just talking about, that, if I just had a break, if I just had this. And, my belief in the business is that it's it's 1,000 small breaks. There's usually not one big break. But mentorship is a huge part of the game. And so how did you land that? And what you know?
Well, I think it's it's like it takes a million little breaks, and also it takes things you think are your big break that aren't your big breaks. So,
Isn't that funny? You're like,
yeah.
I made it, and then it just.
Yeah, you just go, nobody, did that not air? I thought it was on TV. Like, I mean, there's many times you think, once that airs, it's all going to change. Or once this thing happens, it's all going to be different. So for me, the thing about the Chris Rock thing is it was a break I wasn't really looking for. Also, the other thing in comedy, once you're around for a few years, and if you have any level of skill and you get any work, you're sort of around people of different levels of fame. Like, Chris is super famous, but I'd worked with Chappelle a bunch of times at that point on stand. I mean, I'd opened for him to stand up. So it's like, not to diminish it, but you sort of get used to the fact that you can't expect every famous person you meet or
to
work
take you
with.
another wing.
Yeah,
you just develop. Come out.
Yeah,
Let's go.
yeah. So
you and me.
When you start, you're like, oh, I did a week with this person. I'm sure we're about to go on the road. It rarely happens. And so, like, I'd worked with a lot of people of different levels of show business, people who, could have, did have, should have, maybe, And so at that point, you sort of stop looking at those people to be like, I can't expect them to make my career. Like, it's good to know them, and it's good to work with them, and it's good to build relationships, and maybe if they need me. You just have to get like, well, if they need me, they'll call me. If they feel like they have something that's for me or a gig that's appropriate, they'll call me. So, but the thing with Chris was, like, I was doing this show that I'm going to do today, the Kamau Bell Curve Ending Racism, in about an hour. And I knew that I know people who know Chris, but again, it's like show business is like sometimes a small circle. So I knew people who knew him. I heard from those people that he thought I was funny, but I was like, oh, cool, maybe I'll open for him someday. And then he had heard about the show, and so I was in New York one time doing the show, and after the show, he just sort of floated backstage. And it was just like, hey, man. And I had never met him before, and I was like, what is happening? And he talked to me about 5 minutes, and it was funny. He's so famous, and I've seen this happen with him a lot, that people who are in the area just sort of like coagulate around him.
Like,
They want to, or they just start doing the thing where he's just like, there's a camera in his face taking a picture, like, and then it moves away, or people sort of step in and take a selfie without asking. It's like, it's really not something I would want to be a part of. And he just sort of keeps going because he's used to it. But, so it was at UCB Theater in New York City, a famous, well-known place that turns out a lot of talent. And he was just like, hey, man, you're funny, thanks, good to see you. And he disappeared. And then a couple months later, I got a phone call, and he said, I want to help you get a TV show. And I was like, what does that even mean? And like a year or so later, we had, maybe 13 months later, we were at a FX meeting, and a few months after that, we had a show. And then a year after that, it was over.
But in there is the nugget that how did you get his attention, or how did you find your mentor? Would be maybe a better, more balanced way of asking the question. But the reality is, it sounds like you just went to work every day.
I mean, I have a lot of mentors, and some people know they're my mentor, and some people just think they're good friends of mine, and some people I've never met who are my mentors. So I think a lot of it is like trying to see who else in the business is doing or has a career that you like. And so I was always aware that people had careers that I really thought I could have, were people who weren't super famous. They were people who were like just doing their thing. And also were sort of their own industry. Like, people sort of supported whatever they did. Like, I just like you. So, it's a book, it's a live show, it's music, whatever it is, I'll just be there. So, that's the kind of thing I always wanted. And that's kind of the career I had. But so I think that's part of it. So those people become mentors even though you've never met them. And then there's people where it's like you just sort of working side by side with people. And some of those people in comedy, you may find yourself in a few years next to people who've been around a lot longer than you, as far as but you're in the same place in show business because maybe they had a career and they went up and it came down, or maybe this is all they want or this is all they could get. And so there's a lot of wisdom out there, and you just have to sort of keep your ears open. And comics love to talk about the work and the business and share tales and gossip, and so you got to keep your ears open. And so, one of my best friends is a comedian I met 2 weeks into comedy, just because he was and he's been at all levels of show business. He actually knows Chris too, and I got to hire him. His name's Dwayne Kennedy, on my TV show to work on the TV show with Chris. So it was this whole circle of life thing. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You said book at one point in there. Talk to me about the book.
Oh yeah, The Awkward Thoughts of W. Kamau Bell.
Here's the book right here.
You'll insert it in here.
So
it's got a much longer subtitle, but I don't remember all of it.
I was actually going to try and remember it, but I just said, tell me about the book, so I didn't have to remember the long-ass
Tales
subtitle.
of a 6'4" African-American, heterosexual, left-leaning, cisgender, asthmatic, mama's boy, this is in the wrong order right now, black and proud, blurred, and dad, and stand-up comedian. I probably left some words out, but that's the whole subtitle. It's somewhere in there. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah, somewhere. I think I got most of them.
How do you land there? How do you land on that?
Because it's just when you put a book together, it's like you want to, again, I'm not famous and I like words. I'm a big fan of words. So I like to put, I don't believe titles can be too long. Like,
You're good at words.
I just like them. So for me, it's like I like looking at them, like the way they come out of your mouth. I like the way some words sound. So yeah, and so for me, it was like, words are the things of comedians. So for me, it was just like, I don't believe you should not describe what something is. I think, there's an effort now, especially in podcasting, just one word, like cereal. Okay, it's a great push show, but what's it about? I mean, it's just like, I'm not like, so I believe
is it
in like,
cereal with the C?
Yeah.
Like
And then
Captain Crunch?
you go, well, it's about crime. How would I know that? But it's not that that's wrong. That has worked very well for cereal. But for me, it's like, my other podcast is Denzel Washington is the greatest actor of all time, period. Ta-da! Like, it's just like, there's no, what is it about? I just believe in the Fiona Apple school of like, put all the words in, make sure it does everything it says in the tin. So it's a book it's sort of part memoirs and part essays and ruminations about the current state of my life and how I got here and the current state of America and what we're going to do next, hopefully. So yeah, it's just it was sort of written in a very quick, hectic way because my life was hectic and the world was hectic and just came out May 2nd.
Well, let's shift gears into your actual work of like the topics that you cover, why those topics. I'd like to talk a little bit about fear also, specifically maybe in season 1. You travel around the country, putting yourself in positions, like you said, trying to tell a story that needs to be told, sometimes in sort of harrowing positions. And one episode in particular is you go and you interview the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, that happened.
Talk about,
for
fear
me,
and discomfort and...
Yeah, the fear is there when it's funny when people talk about the Klan episode. I had fear on this season. We did a thing where I rock climbed a wall that was probably like, it was probably 25 feet high. And I was like, ah! And I got about halfway. I was like, I'm done. So, fear, there's lots of different types of fear. Sure. So for me, and we in the first season, we went to San Quentin prison. I had fear to go into a prison. Never been to a prison before. This season we talked to some members of the alt-right at a conference they had in D.C. So it's in D.C., but it's like all these people who are like, they're not fans of mine. It's white nationalists. So it's like the Klan, but with suits on. And so for me, like, in my life, like I'm not like a adrenaline junkie. I'm not like Casey. Like I'm not trying to like I'm not bungee jumping. I'm not extreme sporting. I'm not like going to the protest to start a fight. I'm not that guy. But if it's on TV, I'll bungee jump. Like I feel like that's the whole point. That's my job on the show is to sort of put myself into uncomfortable situations and to sort of see what happens and challenge myself and hopefully through that connect with people and find out things I didn't know and therefore hopefully the people watching at home didn't know. So for me, I'm like the surrogate for like, you shouldn't go to a Klan rally. Nobody should go to a Klan rally. Even Klansmen shouldn't. But if I go and I find somebody who will talk to me, maybe they will reveal something about themselves that people watching didn't know. So it's not that I'm like thinking like finding out why they're racist or I'm trying to talk them out of it. It's just like, hey, we're just two people. Let's talk. If you can have that conversation, and when people can, they reveal things. It doesn't mean we don't agree to agree at the end. It's like we don't really agree to
good idea.
Yeah. You made some good points. But it is like if they will sit down and talk, they will expose things about themselves that people are like, I had no idea that they do these things or they believe these. I thought I knew. There's a lot of this with my show. I think people think they know about things, and some subject you may know inside and out, but we're still going to put somebody on the show you've never heard from before. So a lot of it is like people think they know, but then they watch it and they go, I had no idea. And so for me, that's what the show's all about.
That's part of the beauty of art, though, is you usually don't know until you go there, and it's the artist's job to go there. How much do you look at that as your role is actually to go there because it's part of your performance? Might be a stretch, but part of the
it's what I do best if I do anything good at all. I can't say that, but it's just like I think for me, and I talk about this in the book. I believe in uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable situations as a way to sort of push yourself and get to new vistas. And I believe in this country we spend a lot of time avoiding those things. And so for the show and also my stand-up work and even show, it's about like let's just have the conversation. Nothing's gonna change in one conversation, but let's at least have the conversation. Maybe we can continue to have the conversation and then things can change. I feel like all the social movements in this country that have made America better were started with
can't even say
uncomfortable
great. You can't
conversations.
even say it
No,
anymore.
you can't use that word. But it's like all the social movements that have made this country better than it was started with people going like, does it make sense that black people have to ride in the back of the bus? Like, like it's just all like, does it make sense that women don't have the right to vote? Isn't that kind of weird? Like, it's just like, those are all uncomfortable conversations that are had. And then some women go, let's go talk to the men about letting us vote. Hey, we don't mean to bother you, but it seems like we should vote, right? And if those guys were like, yeah, you should, all right. But then that didn't happen, so they have to keep ratcheting up the stage, and you have the women's suffragette movement, or the suffragette movement, and same thing with the March on Washington. It's just MLK is like, I tried to talk to you fools, like I tried to say, so we'll just all go to Washington. So for me, that's the beginning of all these things is uncomfortable conversations.
Are you an action-oriented activist, a person with the vision of wanting to know more, and you use comedy to access that, or are you a comedian who is looking for material, and that's welcome material?
Some combination. I'm a comedian. If the world was a beautiful, lovely place and peace reigned supreme, I'd still be a comedian. That's my job description. It just so happens that I think because of the parents I came from, and the times that we live in, that I feel like this is where my comedy belongs. There's lots of other comedians, and I love comedians who don't talk about these things. I'm not saying every comedian has to do this way. I just feel like this is where I belong. This is the best jokes I write are about these things.
Two questions. One, I find that for myself and for a lot of people that I've talked to that have been on the show, finding your voice is actually the hardest part of creating. And you feel like you're faking it for a long time until you kind of stumble into it. So that's the first question. Tell us about that journey. And then I've got a second question. I got to follow up to that. So tell us about the journey of finding your voice, and how long did it take you, and how much did you suck at it for a long time? I mean, literally, like, suck at being you. Or did you just stepped into it? Or
No. I started in '94. I was just sort of at very levels of mediocrity until about 2000. Some good, like, people on the scene in the Bay Area liked me. Like, the clubs liked me. I didn't really have a following, but I was a good comedian. But, wasn't 100% by any stretch, and had really good nights. I was always getting a little bit better, but I wasn't taking any sort of leaps and bounds or that interesting. And then, so in 2007, that's 13 years in, I'd been on Comedy Central 2005 and been to Montreal Comedy, like the New Faces Showcase in Montreal, which is supposed to be a big break. I was like, it's going to be the big break. No manager, no agent, no nothing, so no auditions, no anything, nothing.
Nothing?
And so I came back from Montreal.
Did you see me? I was there.
I was there, yeah. I mean, I really didn't have a good set, so I knew what would happen. It was like in the middle of the set, I'm like, this is not going to work. So, came back. I have dealt with depression around those things. But so in 2013, I really had to I was like, okay, I'm going to basically ask myself, what would you do if you were already famous? This isn't working. So if you could just get to the famous part, like you've seen like Chappelle or Jon Stewart or Chris Rock or any number of people, Wanda Sykes, Kathy Griffin, any number of comedians, like these people are successful. What would you do if you were one of those people? I was like, I would have a TV show like The Daily Show, but about racism. And that's the thing I thought to myself. And I was like, okay. And you can't have a TV show because you're not working
you're not on TV.
So, well, then what can you do? I can rent a black box theater and do a live show and get a projector and create a PowerPoint presentation, even though I didn't know how to do any of that. And put it on and sell tickets and get a poster and get my friends to help. And my friend's a theater producer and he'll help and I'll borrow a projector or trade for a projector. And just learning, I had to learn all that stuff on the fly and learn how to write press releases and things like that. So it was like things I didn't want to do because I was like a comedian, like I'm really just thinking about
I'm the artist.
I'm working on my video game thinking about the art. That's something that was like, well, if you want to have a show in a theater, you need to write a press release or you need to hire somebody. I don't have any money. Okay, I better learn how to write a press release. You want a projector, you need a projector. Okay, my friend has a projector, I'll trade for the projector. Okay, but how does the projector work? I have no idea. So how does PowerPoint work? I've never opened this thing on my computer before. Let me see what happens. So it's this thing where you suddenly start to my nose sort of took me places and I was like, oh, okay. So consequently, like I sort of end up in places where where there's a lot of PowerPoint things happening and it's like
this?
Like not this, but like out there, wherever I'll be
later.
We're
going to speak later. Okay.
We're going to speak later.
I just got off stage. There was PowerPoints.
Yeah. Well, there's people doing PowerPoints, and it's like mine does not look like theirs because I didn't come through the PowerPoint world. I came through the comedy world. So, so it's just like you just sort of like, all right, so I need this, so I need to fix this. Okay, well, we need to get people to sell tickets at the door. Okay, well, how do we get people in the room because you're not famous? Okay, it's a show about racism. Bring a friend of a different race, get in 2 for 1. All right, so we did that. So suddenly, first night, the show standing room only, projectors, like sitting on my then girlfriend's but now wife's lap, burning her legs because we didn't know where else to put it because we didn't think that through. The screen is we're doing it on the wall, but I don't know how to like get out of the production screen of the PowerPoint, so it's all like screwed up, and it's like we didn't know how to do any of that, and so it's not working very well. And I did like over an hour, even though I'd never really done that long on stage before, and suddenly at the end I get like it's just like the best I've ever felt as a comedian. I was like, okay, I gotta do more of this. And so it was really just like I said, like realizing, okay, the things I'm doing aren't working. I'm not getting ahead enough. I'm seeing friends of mine pass me by, which doesn't. They should get their success. It's not competitive, also, but it's just like I feel like I'm not getting everything out of my talent, and I feel like I'm not. The way I'm doing it is not going to get everything out of my talent. So I stepped out of the comedy clubs for a while and went to theaters, and sort of that's the show that Chris Rock saw that led to Totally Biased. I mean, it took like from 2007. Chris Rock didn't see it until 2010. And then it went on FX 2012. So it's like we're talking about 5 years, but but
incredible.
But really like 15, like what is that? Like almost 20 years by the time I got the show. So yeah, it's just it's nobody sort of knows that, but they just sort of see like, oh, you met Chris Rock a year ago, and now he's got a TV show. How did that happen?
Right.
So that the narrative doesn't look as long as it is.
For sure, it's the classic 10-year overnight success. Right?
Yeah,
You've been grinding in your parents' basement and making shit happen. And one of the things that I'm gonna put some words in your mouth. You can tell me if I'm doing so errantly, but that you saw what success looked like. You said famous, but then you changed it to success, and I think that's what you meant. I saw what success looked like, and you deconstructed. You said, oh, it's a television show. And you said, well, I don't got a television show, so what do I got?
Yeah.
I got some rubber bands, I got some string.
Exactly, I got some friends.
Yeah, I got some friends. My friend had a projector. And so you're literally mimicking or imitating what you see, and when you...
But doing it on the level I can do it.
Right, and ironically, this is the part that I think is beautiful, is that becomes... Those are your constraints, and your constraints can contribute to your style. It's what can you do with what you have?
No, I mean it's like there's lots of things like that. Like why are things the way they are? Because that's all the people had at the time to do the thing. On some level, whatever.
The blues.
Yeah, the blues is a great example. I was thinking about like food. Like black people don't go, let's only eat the feet of the pig. Like we just sort of go like, that's all we got left. What can we do with this? Let's pickle them, first of all. You know what I mean? Like it's just that you sort of like, and then suddenly it's like people are like, now you go into fancy restaurants and they call them trotters. You know what I mean? Like so it just becomes a thing where suddenly they, that becomes a delicacy. But
that's right.
For me it's like that thing where you just have the restraints actually can help you sort of create the art, because if you have a completely blank canvas and unlimited funds, Hollywood does that all the time. It doesn't work out that often.
So the other point, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. The other point was a little bit around fear, but also about revealing yourself and finding some answers in here and being vulnerable. To that point, what is something about you that people don't know that if they did know, they would be really surprised?
That's funny. When this turned into therapy. We're not broadcasting, right? This part's being cut for...
This is gonna be your takeaway. No, I'm just not.
No. I'm trying to think what do people, because I talk about a lot of things. And here's the thing. There's certain things that I hope they never find out because it's none of their business. So I mean, it's like, to be quite honest, there's things where you're like, that's between me and my wife. As much as I think it's fun to be an open book, and I've tried to be as open about a lot of things as I can be. I'm
not trying to pry into that.
No, I know. I'm just trying to think of things. I don't know.
In this context, this world right here, what we're talking about, like.
I mean, I think that I think the thing is, like, I think I get a lot of credit for being sort of like, you're sort of unflappable, like in these situations, and yet in my mind it's all flaps. Like I'm just like, oh, like if I'm talking to my wife, I can let it all hang out and be like, oh, and she sees it, it's like, and I go, all right, I gotta go to the show. Hey, clans members, you know what I mean? Like but it's a lot of like, I get scared, I get nervous, I think it's stupid, I think I'm gonna fail, I think that I made bad choices. The phrase "whose idea is this" goes through my head a lot right before I go on stage. Like I'm going to do that downstairs because it's like we're outside. What is this? So I think that people don't realize
in
how
Salt
much
Lake
time
City.
In Salt Lake City, I don't think people realize how much time I spend thinking about failure and the possibility of it happening. And a lot of times people go, "That means you're pessimistic." And then I was like, I don't know. But for me, I remember seeing the movie Ghost Dog years ago, and it's it's like a sort of a modern era samurai movie, and Forrest Whitaker's in it. And he talks about the samurai code, which I don't know if it's true, but it was in the movie, so.
It must be.
But the idea that like samurais have to imagine their worst defeat in order to sort of be prepared for victory, and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing, because I really am like, I'm trying to imagine. I sort of spend a lot of time in my head sitting with failure and thinking about failure and anticipating failure. For me, which makes it so that sort of like when success comes, it's like, first of all, it's sweeter, but also like it's you don't get blindsided by things. Like now, often the thing that blindsides me is the thing I didn't. I was like, oh, I didn't cover that angle. I didn't think about that type of failure. But for me, it's just like, therefore, criticism sort of feels like, yeah, of course I can be criticized. I've already thought of it, like or like, or I didn't think of that angle, but I knew I could be criticized. So for me, it's like, spending time dealing with in my mind, it's like a. It's like people think it's all under control, but in my house, in my brain, it's a mess. It's like my room when I was a kid. It's just a mess, and I'm just constantly searching for things like, where did that go? Why is that here? Whose idea was this? And the windows are all open, the doors are slamming open and shut. There's it's a whole, so it's a middle of a hurricane in my head. But it's sort of like I have to sort of like when I go on stage, get to the eye of the storm.
New season started last month.
Yep.
How you feel about it? What's in store?
Good. I mean, I feel like that the first season was great, and I did work. There's going to be work in the first season that I think about for the rest of my life, and I think that I'll always be associated with and I'll be proud of. But like the way I started thinking about it is the first season was like the mixtape, and this is like the album. So, this just feels like the first season. A lot of the crew, everybody started figuring out what the show is, and a lot of times people have different ideas of what the show is, and a lot of times there's friction around that. This season. We hired some new people. We knew what the show was, and I think that like if we get to a third season, they will know how to make it really good. Like I think I'm really proud of the work this season. I just think that we're sort of constantly like it's like I was thinking of like sculptors. Like the first season, you're sort of like just trying to make it look like something. Like
is that a head or a
duck? Yeah. And the second season is like, oh, it's I can see it's a man sitting with this like this. But now the third season, you're like, oh, fingernails. And then fourth season, like got all the hairs. And then So it's just like I feel like that's where we're at. Like it finally looks like a sculpture of the thinker, but it's still there's more detail to put in. But yeah, this season we're talking about all the things this country needs to talk about. So immigrants and refugees, crime, gang violence in Chicago. We have an episode about Standing Rock and Native issues in this country. An episode about Muslims in America and small town America. Episode about Puerto Rico, because it's like this thing. It's like sort of this part of America that we don't think about enough. Most of us Puerto Ricans do. And I have an episode about whether I should buy a gun to protect my family. So things that are like things that I'm thinking about and the country thinking about. We're trying to put on CNN. Sundays at 10 o'clock.
Sundays at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks, man.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate
I'm going to be standing in the front row.
Yeah, all right. Let's do it.
That's kind of weird.
Why it's all right. we'll figure it out.
You're like, why are you in Salt Lake City in the front row? And good luck tonight. You're going to crush it. Thanks again.
Man.
And we'll see you again probably tomorrow. See? It's a full circle right there. Full circle. We did it.
Circle of life.
Bye.